The second patrol car stopped behind my maintenance van, lights washing the 60 mailboxes blue and red. Vanessa Pike stood beside the deputy with her phone raised, telling him I had master keys to vacant homes and refused to leave her private HOA. Mud clung to my boots from the water shutoff I had been repairing. I already told her, I said. I'm not in her HOA. Vanessa smiled. Exactly. That makes him a trespasser. Then the deputy asked me which house belonged to me. If you were standing there, what would you say? My answer started 11 days earlier, with 3 old keys my father left me. 11 days earlier, those 3 keys sat in my palm outside the Caldwell Ridge leasing office. Brass for the maintenance building, silver for vacant units, black for the utility rooms. My father had carried the same set until arthritis made turning them painful. I was not there for nostalgia. I had just completed the paperwork that gave me controlling ownership of Caldwell Ridge properties, and before approving another management budget, I wanted to see what 60 rental houses looked like from the ground instead of a spreadsheet. I started with work orders. House 12 had a porch light that had been reported 3 times. House 31 had standing water near the rear foundation. At House 47, an older tenant named Marlene Brooks showed me a loose porch rail and handed me 2 unanswered maintenance requests. I photographed everything, logged the dates, and called our maintenance supervisor before I reached the sidewalk. That was where Vanessa Pike found me. She pulled up in a white Lexus crossover, stepped out carrying a thick blue binder, and surprised me by knowing Marlene's problem already. That rail has been on my list for 6 weeks, she said. Your management company keeps closing requests without fixing them. She opened the binder. Dates, photographs, email printouts, names. She was organized. Worse, she was right. I'm Nathan Cole, I said. I'm with ownership. Vanessa Pike, president of the Caldwell Ridge Residents Association. She did not ask for an apology. She gave me 3 more addresses. One had a street light out. Another had drainage, backing across a driveway after heavy rain. The third involved an elderly tenant who had been charged a late fee after the online payment system failed. I checked each claim before lunch. All 3 held up. By Friday, I had the streetlight contractor scheduled, drainage crews inspecting the culvert, and the late fee reversed. Vanessa called that afternoon. That is the first time somebody from your side has actually listened. I should have corrected the phrase your side. Instead, I said, keep sending me problems. I will deal with the ones we are responsible for. That sentence bought me goodwill, but it also created an assumption I did not notice. The following Monday, I drove back to inspect the drainage work and found a laminated notice tucked beneath my windshield wiper. Caldwell Ridge Homeowners Association. Violation, unauthorized commercial vehicle. Fine, $250. My Ford Transit had Caldwell Ridge properties printed across both doors. I carried the notice into the leasing office and asked the bookkeeper where association fines were deposited. She stared at the logo, then at me. Nathan, we do not collect those. She turned her monitor around and pulled up a tenant ledger. But somebody has been telling residents we do. I asked her to show me one. She opened the tenant ledger for House 28. The rent entries looked normal until a note appeared beside the previous month. Resident reported HOA balance of $675. I pulled the lease. Nothing authorized our management office to collect private association fines, and nothing allowed a residents group to attach those charges to rent. Who entered this note? I asked. Melissa, before she quit, the bookkeeper said. Vanessa kept calling about unpaid balances. Melissa started recording them so management would know who had disputes. That was sloppy, but it was not proof of fraud. I needed to know what Vanessa believed she was authorized to do. I called her instead of sending a lawyer. She arrived 20 minutes later carrying the same blue binder. I placed my $250 notice on the desk. You find the company maintenance van. Vanessa glanced at it and almost smiled. Then the system works. Same rules for everyone. Who gave you authority to issue monetary penalties? Her expression changed, not defensive yet, just careful. She opened her binder to an old management letter. The document authorized the Residents Association to coordinate parking, common area concerns, neighborhood events, and resident communications. Vanessa tapped the phrase parking coordination. Your previous manager gave us enforcement authority 18 months ago. Coordination is not enforcement. Tell that to the families who could not get management to answer a telephone call. Then she surprised me. She produced receipts. A tree service after a storm. replacement cameras near the mail kiosk, playground repairs. She had spent association money on real problems, and the invoices matched work I could physically verify. Residents approved assessments because things needed fixing, she said. We stopped waiting for your company. I could not dismiss that. Our previous management contractor had failed these people badly enough that Vanessa had stepped into the vacuum. So I offered her a path out. Freeze all fines immediately. Stop using the word homeowners. Give me the association bank records. I would fund an independent accounting review, then formalize a resident council with clearly written authority. For several seconds, she considered it. And who has final say? She asked. On resident activities, the council gets a real voice. On leases, buildings, land, and property enforcement, ownership does. Her fingers stopped on the binder. Ownership meaning your company. Yes. And you speak for them. I should have answered more carefully. I speak for ownership. Vanessa closed the binder. Then I think our board needs to meet before I hand you anything. She left without raising her voice. That evening, I received an email announcing an emergency association meeting. Attached was a color map of Caldwell Ridge with every street, common area, and all 60 houses enclosed by one red boundary. Across the top, someone had typed 4 words that had never appeared on any ownership document I had seen. Caldwell Ridge HOA. Jurisdiction. I enlarged the map on my laptop and compared it with the original site plan stored in our property files. The streets matched. The house numbers matched. The red boundary did not. It wrapped around rental homes, maintenance space, utility access, and land the association had never been granted authority to control. More interesting was the tiny footer, revised by V. Pike. I called the former regional manager, Darren Holt, who had signed the 18-month-old authorization letter. He remembered Vanessa immediately. She was relentless, he said, but useful. Residents trusted her, and my office was buried. I asked whether he had created an HOA. Absolutely not. They were a residents' association. Did you authorize fines? Silence. I let them coordinate parking complaints. That was not my question. Darren exhaled. No, not monetary fines. Then he admitted something worse. During a staffing shortage, he had given Vanessa temporary access to the community email list and permission to use the leasing office conference room. He had also allowed her to distribute parking notices using management letterhead because he thought residents would take them seriously. He had handed her the appearance of official power without defining where it ended. Before hanging up, Darren said, Nathan, do not assume everybody there sees her as the problem. For a while, she was the only person answering them. The emergency meeting proved him right. 43 households showed up. I expected questions about the map. Instead, I walked into applause for Vanessa. She had printed photographs of the broken streetlight, the flooded driveway, the damaged playground, every failure our old management team had ignored. Then she put my commercial vehicle fine on the projector. Management wants one set of rules for residents and another for itself. Heads turned toward me. She was good. She never called me corrupt. She let the room reach its own conclusion. When she finally invited me to speak, I made the mistake of leading with authority instead of trust. This association has no ownership interest in these properties. A man near the front called out. So now the landlord gets to erase us. Vanessa did not interrupt him. She did not need to. I tried again. Nobody is erasing resident representation. I am saying this map claims powers that were never granted. Vanessa lifted the old management letter. Then perhaps ownership should explain why its own manager authorized us. I could explain it, but not in 30 seconds to people who had spent 2 years being ignored. So I changed course. Freeze the fines for 7 days. Let me review the records. If I am wrong, I will say so in this room. Vanessa looked at the residents, then back at me. And if we refuse, then we have a different problem. The meeting ended without agreement. Outside, I reached my van and found a new orange sticker across the driver's side window. Authorization revoked. Underneath, in smaller print, it said association security had been instructed to deny me access to all HOA-controlled property, including vacant homes. I peeled the orange sticker off carefully instead of tearing it. The adhesive stretched between my fingers, and I slid the whole thing into an envelope. Then I photographed the windshield, the date, and the parking space. Arguing in the lot had already failed. I was done giving Vanessa conversations she could turn into speeches. The next morning, I met Claire Donovan, the real estate attorney who had handled the ownership transition. She read the association letter, Darren Holt's authorization, and Vanessa's altered map without saying much. She cannot revoke the owner's access to its own property, Claire said. But do not confuse being legally right with having control of the situation. Your tenants think she protects them from you. That was the part one had underestimated. Claire recommended a written demand preserving association records and clarifying that nobody was authorized to interfere with emergency maintenance or lawful property access. I approved it, but I rejected her suggestion to immediately seek a court order unless Vanessa actually obstructed essential work. I still believed one formal boundary would cool things down. By noon, Vanessa had posted Claire's letter to the resident message board with one sentence above it. Corporate ownership has lawyered up against our community. My telephone started ringing. 3 tenants demanded to know whether rents were increasing. Another asked whether I planned to evict association members. None of that was in Claire's letter. Vanessa had changed the argument from who controlled the property to whether residents needed protection from me. Then Marlene Brooks called. Water was dripping through the ceiling at House 47. I dispatched our maintenance supervisor, but he called back 10 minutes later. A private security guard at the entrance had told him contractors needed association authorization. Do not argue, I said. I am coming. I took the silver key and drove over myself. Vanessa was waiting near House 47 with the guard. She stayed composed. Emergency work can proceed once we verify the contractor. You do not verify my maintenance staff. Residents asked us to control unauthorized access. Marlene opened her front door behind us. Vanessa, I called him. That should have ended it. Instead, Vanessa stepped aside and said, fine. Document that the resident personally authorized entry. It sounded reasonable enough that the guard relaxed. I repaired the shutoff connection and arranged ceiling work before leaving. For the first time, I understood her advantage. She did not need actual ownership if she could make every unauthorized demand sound like a safety procedure. That evening, Claire forwarded me a photograph taken by another tenant. Vanessa had scheduled a board vote for Monday morning to classify Caldwell Ridge Properties personnel as outside commercial agents requiring association approval before entering any residence or common area. I was reading it when my telephone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It contained a photograph of a letter Vanessa had sent to Marlene months earlier. The last sentence stopped me cold. Failure to pay may result in lien action against your home. I read the lien sentence twice, then called Marlene. Did you pay this? She hesitated. $900. Vanessa said it could become a problem with my house. House 47 was not Marlene's property to lien. She leased it from Caldwell Ridge Properties. The threat was not merely aggressive. It relied on residents believing the association possessed rights it did not have. I sent the letter to Claire and asked for one thing before Monday's vote: a face-to-face meeting with Vanessa and 2 board members. No courtroom, no threats, just documents. Monday morning, Claire placed Darren Holt's original authorization beside Vanessa's jurisdiction map. I put the orange access sticker beside them. Then Marlene, who had agreed to attend, placed her lien letter on top. Vanessa's treasurer, Paul Whitaker, read it and went pale. We cannot lien rental property, he said. Vanessa answered immediately. It says may result. It was compliance language, not a recorded lien. Claire kept her voice level. Then stop using language that implies powers the association does not have. Paul asked Vanessa whether any liens had actually been filed. No, she said. That mattered. It gave everyone a way to step back without pretending nothing had happened. I offered the same terms as before, only in writing. Suspend monetary penalties, withdraw access restrictions, preserve financial records, and convert the group into a properly defined resident council after an independent review. Paul voted yes. Another board member, Denise Carter, joined him. Vanessa stared at the table for several seconds before finally saying, I will suspend enforcement pending review. For the first time in 11 days, I thought we had stopped the escalation. The orange notices came down. Security received written instructions not to interfere with maintenance. Vanessa emailed residents that all fines were temporarily frozen. Even Marlene squeezed my arm afterward and said, maybe now everybody can calm down. I should have known better than to confuse a ceasefire with a settlement. That afternoon, Paul called from his car. His voice was low. Nathan, I need to tell you something before Vanessa does. The association account did not contain only resident dues and fines. 18 months earlier, the old management company had transferred money into it for community expenses during the staffing crisis. Nobody had cleanly separated those funds afterward. Vanessa had been paying vendors from the same account ever since. How much are we talking about? I asked. I do not know yet. Then Claire sent me another message. Vanessa had just retained counsel of her own, and her attorney was claiming the old management company had created an enforceable delegation of authority through its conduct, not merely through the letter we had been reading. My apparent victory had lasted less than 4 hours. Then Paul sent one final photograph, a bank statement showing deposits I had never seen before, including 3 transfers labeled Property Management Reserve. Claire and I spent Tuesday separating 2 questions we had treated as one. What authority had Vanessa claimed, and what authority had our former manager accidentally allowed her to exercise? The bank records answered the second question first. Darren's office had transferred $12,000 into the association account during the staffing crisis for tree removal, lighting, and common area repairs. Vanessa had not hidden the transfers. She had documented the expenses, kept invoices, and used most of the money for exactly those purposes. That made her attorney's argument stronger than I wanted. For 18 months, management had funded the association, accepted some of its work, and failed to object while Vanessa expanded its role. Claire tapped the old authorization letter. This still does not make them owners, and it does not magically create lien rights. But your former manager blurred the operational boundary badly enough that Vanessa can argue she reasonably believed she had broader authority. That changed everything. If I attacked Vanessa as nothing more than a fraud, I would be ignoring evidence that my own side helped create the confusion. I called Darren again and asked one question. Did Vanessa ever ask you whether she could find residents? His answer came slowly. Once. I told her to handle neighborhood compliance because I did not have staff for it. Did you define compliance? No, there it was. Not permission for liens. Not ownership. But enough ambiguity to explain why Vanessa had grown confident. I stopped, planning to destroy the association and change strategy completely. We would separate legitimate resident representation from property authority in public, document by document, and let the residents see where one ended and the other began. Then Paul called. Vanessa had withdrawn her agreement to cooperate with the accounting review. Her attorney had advised the board not to release additional records until ownership proved it had authority over every property covered by the association map. The demand was almost absurd, except it handed me exactly the question I had avoided answering since I arrived. Vanessa still believed Caldwell Ridge Properties was one investor among several, and that I was merely its representative. My vague introduction had helped preserve that mistake. Claire looked at me across the conference table, then stopped being vague. I opened the old leather case I had brought from my father's office. Inside was the ownership schedule tied to the company records, numbered House 1 through House 60, along with the supporting property documents Claire had handled during the transition. The brass, silver, and black keys rested in the side pocket. I had carried proof of the larger truth from the beginning and never understood why I might need to show it. Before I could answer, my telephone lit up with an alert from the resident message board. Vanessa had posted a notice for Wednesday morning. Unauthorized corporate personnel entering association-controlled property would be reported to law enforcement. 20 minutes later, Marlene called about water running near the shutoff at House 47. I picked up the silver key. Vanessa had just created the exact confrontation she claimed she wanted to prevent. I called Marlene before I left the office. Is water entering the house? Not yet. It is pooling beside the foundation. Stay inside and keep the area clear. I am bringing maintenance. This time I did not go alone. Our maintenance supervisor followed in his truck, while Claire stayed on the telephone with copies of the ownership records, Darren's authorization letter, Vanessa's map, and the notice she had posted 20 minutes earlier. I put my father's leather case behind the passenger seat. The 3 keys were inside. I was not going there to prove I was more powerful than Vanessa. I was going there because House 47 needed protection, and I finally understood that every decision from this point forward had to be documented as carefully as the property itself. We reached Caldwell Ridge just after 7. The security guard recognized my van and stepped toward the driveway, then stopped when I lowered the window. Emergency maintenance at 47. The resident requested it. You can document our arrival, but you cannot delay the repair. He looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Pike told me nobody from Caldwell Ridge Properties enters without association approval. Then call her. He did. We continued to House 47, where water had begun spreading across the red clay beside the shutoff box. My supervisor isolated the line while I photographed the condition and time. Marlene watched through her storm door. Vanessa arrived 5 minutes later carrying the blue binder that had followed this fight from the beginning. She did not yell. She stood on the sidewalk and said, "Nathan, you were notified." And Marlene reported a water problem. You could have requested authorization from an association that does not own this house. Her jaw tightened. That is your interpretation. No, that is the question we should have settled before either of us started pretending the other side did not exist. For half a second, she looked tired rather than angry. Then she noticed my supervisor opening the utility access with the black key. "Stop," she said. "That area is association controlled." I looked at the brass key in my hand, the silver one I had used for the vacant units, and the black one turning in property infrastructure my father had maintained for years. Every key Vanessa considered evidence that I was an outsider was evidence of the responsibility I had failed to explain. I told my supervisor to finish the repair. Vanessa stepped away and made a telephone call. 10 minutes later, the first patrol car turned onto Caldwell Ridge Drive. Then a second, red and blue light rolled across the same 60 mailboxes on Vanessa's jurisdiction map. She raised her phone and walked toward the deputies. I slid the leather case from my van, but left it closed. Vanessa reached them first. "That man has been formally barred from HOA-controlled property." Deputy Luis Ortega looked from her notice to me. "Sir, do you live here?" "No." "Are you a member of this HOA?" "No." Vanessa folded her arms. "Exactly." I looked at Ortega. "Before anybody decides who is trespassing, deputy, ask her one question." He glanced at Vanessa. "Who owns these houses?" Vanessa answered before Ortega could repeat the question. "The association governs all 60 residences inside this boundary." She opened her blue binder to the map with the red line around Caldwell Ridge. Ortega studied it, then looked at me. "That is not what I asked." "Who owns them?" Vanessa's confidence tightened. "The homes are part of our community. Caldwell Ridge Properties has interests here, but this man is a corporate representative who has been told he needs authorization." "Authorization from whom?" I asked. "The elected board." I took the orange access notice from my folder and handed it to Ortega. "That is the document she says bars me." Vanessa pointed toward House 47. He was warned and came back anyway. Marlene opened her storm door. "Deputy, I called him because I had water pooling against my foundation." Ortega nodded and asked Vanessa whether she disputed that. She did not. That mattered. The emergency was real. The resident had requested help, and my maintenance supervisor was already finishing the repair. Ortega turned to me. "You said you own these houses. Can you establish that?" I opened my father's leather case. Vanessa gave a short, frustrated laugh. "He keeps saying ownership like that settles everything. Their own manager delegated authority to us." "Some authority," I said. "That is exactly what we have been trying to separate." I handed Ortega the ownership schedule and supporting property records Claire had prepared, then called her on speaker so she could identify the documents and answer questions about the company. Vanessa leaned closer to the first page. Her expression changed. When she saw House 1 through House 60 listed under the same ownership structure, she recovered quickly. "That still does not invalidate 18 months of management conduct." "No," I said. "It explains why you believed you had authority over resident activities. It does not make you the owner." Ortega did not attempt to decide the broader civil dispute. He did something more important. He told Vanessa he had no basis from what he was seeing to remove me as a trespasser from property my company appeared to own, especially while responding to a tenant-requested maintenance problem. Vanessa lowered her phone. For the first time, she looked less angry than cornered. Then she made her last move. "Fine. If he claims all 60 homes, let him say that in front of all 60 households, with the bank records and the management letter on the table." I looked at her map, then at Marlene standing behind the storm door. "Agreed." Vanessa blinked. She had expected resistance. I called Claire. "Set the property-wide meeting." Then I looked back at Vanessa. "Bring your binder. Bring every assessment. Bring every authorization you believe you have." Her eyes stayed on the ownership schedule. And what are you bringing? I closed the leather case. Everything that proves where your authority ends. The clubhouse was full by 7 that evening. Vanessa sat at the front with her blue binder. Paul Whitaker had the association bank records. Claire sat beside me with Darren Holt's authorization letter, the original property records, and the ownership schedule from my father's leather case. I started with the part Vanessa had been right about. Our former management company had failed residents, transferred $12,000 for community expenses, and allowed her association to handle work it should have handled itself. Then Claire separated that operational history from ownership. The letter authorized coordination. The transfers funded repairs. Neither transferred title to land, created lien rights, or gave the association authority to exclude Caldwell Ridge properties from its own property. Vanessa pushed back hard, then explained the fines management knew about. I did. They should have stopped them. Their failure helped create this mess, and ownership is responsible for correcting that. I placed Marlene's $900 lien warning beside my $250 commercial vehicle fine and the orange notice claiming I had been barred from the property. Then I unfolded Vanessa's red jurisdiction map. You told Deputy Ortega this association governed all 60 residences. Because it does represent this community. Representation is not ownership. I opened the schedule. House 1, House 12, House 28, House 31, House 47, House 60. Every address on her map traced back to Caldwell Ridge properties under the ownership records Claire had already verified during my transition to controlling ownership. I looked around the room. When I told Vanessa I was not in her HOA, I was telling the truth. I am not one of its members. I own the company that owns all 60 homes it claimed authority over. Nobody applauded. The silence was better. People were reading. Paul finally closed the bank folder and moved that all monetary enforcement remain suspended, unauthorized access restrictions be withdrawn permanently, and an independent accounting determine which resident charges should be refunded. Denise seconded him. The board approved it without Vanessa's vote. Vanessa resigned as president before the meeting ended. The accounting later separated legitimate community expenses from unsupported penalties, and the association returned the improper charges, including Marlene's $900. Caldwell Ridge Properties covered the review and corrected the management failures that had helped create the problem. No fake liens had ever been recorded, so there was nothing to unwind against the properties themselves. The Residents Association was replaced by a resident council with written limits, transparent finances, and no authority to interfere with leases, maintenance, or ownership access. Weeks later, I stood outside House 47 tightening Marlene's new porch rail. My father's brass, silver, and black keys hung from my belt. The red HOA jurisdiction map was gone from the clubhouse wall. So was the rule that had supposedly made me a trespasser. Vanessa had called the cops because I said I was not in her HOA. She never imagined the man she wanted removed owned every one of the 60 homes around her. The deed did not need to shout.